25 years ago today, on October 9th, 1999, the Houston Astros played their final game ever in the Astrodome. Now, unfortunately, this day isn't one that Houston baseball fans will remember fondly, so I'm going to spare you the details. The Astros did lose 7-5 to their postseason rival, the Atlanta Braves. There was no grand celebration on this day. That happened 6 days earlier on October 3rd, which was the last day of the regular season. The Astros had planned a significant post-game celebration to honor 35 years in the Astrodome, which included paying tribute to the all-time Astrodome team and recognizing many other great Astros from the past. In addition to this, Houston clinched their third straight National League Central Division title, which led to celebrations even before the Dome festivities began. Now, the post-game celebrations lasted nearly 3 hours, culminating with Willie Nelson singing "Turn Out the Lights" from a stage set right behind second base and surrounded by current and former Astros lined up along the infield. Fireworks erupted from the crown block of the massive dome, and the former scoreboard's home run spectacular lit up the Diamond Vision screens. And then the lights went out, marking the greatest moment of collective memories on the Astrodome field. Almost every player who contributed something to not from 1965 to 1999 was present. And then the postseason commenced. But again, I'm going to spare you those details. The teams of the late 90s of the Astros were strong and talented, but they fell short during their postseason attempts during those years. And such is the nature of baseball. At that time, I was working for the Astros in the Astros radio booth alongside announcers Milo Hamilton, Alan Ashby, Bill Brown, Jim DeShays, and the legendary producer, engineer Mike the Loose Cannon. It was a unique position for me, particularly as someone who has always loved broadcasting and journalism. I walked out of the Astrodome that day somewhat numb. Yes, I was disappointed that the Astros season had ended. We all wanted to see a World Series come to Houston, especially during the final season of the Astrodome, but it simply wasn't meant to be. Houston was already one of the fastest growing cities in America when the Astrodome was built in 1965, but it took a special belief that it could actually happen. There were plenty of detractors who thought spending public money on an unprecedented structure would be wasteful. A lawsuit from Houstonian Ned Gill even halted construction a year after the historic groundbreaking with Colt 45 pistols took place in January of 1962. Discussions of a dome stadium had occurred in other cities long before the Astrodome. Walter O'Malley and the Brooklyn Dodgers wanted to build a dome and even considered a retractable roof, but political entanglements kept the project from moving beyond the conceptual stage. However, in Houston, the idea was germinated, it was envisioned, it was believed in, and ultimately approved through 2 bond issues. It was here in Houston that the engineering minds that intensely focused on how to construct a dome structure 4.5 times larger than any previous example, which was the Pantheon in Rome from 125 AD. It was here that steel workers began to lift specially fabricated beams into place, turning a concept into reality for the first time. It was in Houston, Harris County, Texas. This area of the country achieved what was once deemed impossible. I realize this may be difficult for some to grasp today, especially in a world where stadiums have become more luxurious than ever before. But let me remind you, without the Astrodome in Houston, those modern playpens wouldn't have been built in the same way to enhance fan comfort and generate revenue for the teams that play in them. Think about it. Massive span roofs or retractable roofs, enormous electronic scoreboards, suites, restaurants, plush seating, air conditioning, artificial turf, the ability to host a multitude of events in one space in a stadium. These are the conveniences that we expect today. Yet they didn't exist before the Astrodome. The Roman Colosseum had a massive velarium pulled by slaves to shield much of the arena from the blazing sun, with seating made of stone risers. The Palace of the Fans in Cincinnati had a few exclusive fan boxes for those who were sitting close to the field for Cincinnati Reds games in 1902, but nothing compared to what was introduced in the Astrodome in 1965. This was a column-free open space that spanned 642 feet across, stood 208 feet tall in the interior, with a 710-foot wide exterior span. People simply couldn't believe that such a structure could be built and remain standing. Skeptical media from New York arrived when the Astrodome opened on April 9, 1965, for an exhibition game between the Astros and the Yankees. Houston pitcher Hal Woodashik even asked his family to stay home for that first game, as it would be the first time the Astrodome would be filled with a sellout crowd of over 48,000. The Astrodome made headlines on the front pages of newspapers worldwide. Now, as a historian, my thoughts drifted back to the 1990 season. I was 15 years old, and the Astros celebrated 25 years of playing in the Dome. They brought back former players from both the Astros and New York Yankees who had opened the Dome with that exhibition game on April 9th of 65. The old-timers played a 4-inning exhibition game before the Astros game that night. And outside, banners and candles had adorned the exterior of the Astrodome. But what I remember most is that the Astros wore a commemorative patch on their uniform sleeve to mark 25 years in the Astrodome. Now, 25 years later, I realize that the same amount of time has passed since the team left the Dome. And while there's nothing wrong with the Astros wanting a new ballpark, building it and moving on, I can't help but think about how Houston has done virtually nothing with the most identifiable landmark that put the city on the international map and helped shape it into the wonderful, culturally diverse, and innovative place that it is today. So here we are, 25 years since that day, a quarter of a century. It feels both like a short time and yet so long ago. So let's reflect on the past 25 years since the Astros left and see how the Astrodome has endured through neglect and the hopes of revitalization under its dome ceiling once again. By the year 2000, 3 years had passed since the NFL's Houston Oilers left for Tennessee. Houston NFL Holdings successfully gained an expansion franchise that became the Houston Texans. The Astros were playing in downtown Houston at what was then Enron Field, which we now know today as Minute Maid Park. The team bought out the remainder of their 40-year lease at the Astrodome, paying $750,000 annually to Harris County through 2004. The Houston Rockets had also moved into their new home at Toyota Center around that time. Now, Harris County is the owner of the Astrodome. They initially proposed a renovation to rebuild the dome's interior for a new NFL team and the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. The rodeo had moved into the dome in 1966, and it flourished through the years. It was held there until 2002. Money was still owed on the building at the time from the original 1960s bonds that financed the world's first dome stadium, and Harris County felt that a renovation would be a great way to improve the iconic building and the complex it occupies while taking it to the future. The Texans did not want to renovate the Astrodome. They wanted a new building, and that's fine. What was constructed was the NFL's first retractable roof stadium, NRG Stadium, built at grade level, meaning the playing field was level with the parking lot and making the new stadium appear to dwarf the Astrodome next door, which had a field 25 feet below street level. The design of the Astrodome allowed half of the arriving crowds to walk down to their seats while the other half went upward, alleviating congestion along the ramps. But outside, it looked like one is completely bigger than the other. The Astrodome Redevelopment Corporation was a private entity that entered an exclusive 5-year agreement with Harris County to help develop the dome into a massive hotel. Unfortunately, funding for that project never materialized, and there was one glaring reason why. A tri-party agreement amongst Harris County, the Houston Texans, and the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo grants exclusive access and control to the sports complex during their events. And while this is completely justified, it means that any hotel or private entity operating in the Astrodome would be unable to function during those times. The rodeo moves into the complex in late winter for several weeks. And then the Texans have 8 home games that share the same exclusivity. And as you may have noticed, the 25 years since October 9th, 1999 have been filled with logistical issues and growing misinformation about the Astrodome's future and renovation. So let's clarify a few points. 1. The Astrodome does not cost taxpayers millions of dollars per year. All of the original bonds, including renovation costs from the 1980s, have been paid off. The dome is a fully owned asset of Harris County. 2. Asbestos abatement took place 10 years ago as the dome was prepared for renovation and future use. 3. Harris County repainted and cleaned the dome's exterior in 2015 to match its original appearance from 1965, something that hadn't been done since the mid-1990s. 4. The revocation of the Astrodome certificate of occupancy was due to the need for a fire alarm system update, not because the building is in disrepair. The update is not financially sensible without a main tenant or current public-private use of the building, which will come when plans eventually move forward. And thanks to local Houstonians, the Astrodome became a state antiquities landmark in 2017 and received a recorded Texas Historic Landmark marker in 2018, which was graciously funded by the Houston Astros. This designation means the alterations of the building cannot occur without the approval of the Texas Historical Commission, which protects structures like the Astrodome from demolition while allowing renovations to ensure sustainability and operation. And the Astrodome is a product of over-engineering by the teams that designed it. This engineering excellence is one of the traits that earned the building the title of the eighth wonder of the world. And probably the biggest misnomer, there was no vote to demolish the Astrodome. The 2013 vote to allocate public funds for renovation was merely a bond vote. Talks of demolition emerged because at the time there was no alternative plan. Now, it is important to consider the political leaders who represent their constituents. Harris County Judge Robert Eccles worked with the Astrodome Redevelopment Corporation in the 2000s, and when that deal fell through, there was no clear solution in sight. Discussions ranged from filmed sound stages and vertical farming to ski slopes, rebuilding Astroworld, and all of that mainly came from the public. When Ed Emmett became county judge, he began gathering information on the dome's situation and actively explored the logistics of renovating it into a modern county park with festival space and underground parking. In 2016, Emmett and Harris County Commissioners Court approved $105 million for a renovation project. But when Lena Hidalgo was elected in 2018, those plans were put on the back burner. And Hidalgo stated she lacked sufficient information on the Astrodome while criticizing the feasibility of Emmett's multi-stage plan. Since 2018, Hidalgo has not prioritized the Astrodome, focusing instead on evergreen situations like flood control, roads, and other ongoing issues that will always be part of the Houston landscape, no matter what chief executive is in position of the county. Meanwhile, the Astrodome remains a hotly contested issue that still needs addressing. In 2017, I was invited to testify before the State Senate Committee at the Capitol in Austin on behalf of the Harris County citizens. At that time, the Dean of the Texas Senate, John Whitmire, today's Houston mayor, filed Senate Bill 884, which challenged Ed Emmett's plan to renovate the Astrodome. In a clear political maneuver against a county wanting to utilize revenue for rehabilitating a fully owned asset, Whitmire and the committee scrutinized everything Emmett had to say. The bill became a non-issue, though, as it got stuck in the Texas House of Representatives, and it died when the session ended that May. Now, during this hearing, the committee asked me why we should keep the Astrodome if a place like Yankee Stadium could be torn down in New York. My passion for the Astrodome was misconstrued by the committee as superseding knowledge of the situation. I explained that while Yankee Stadium was significant from a sports perspective, it was neither the first of its kind, nor did it place New York City on the international map. Furthermore, the new Yankee Stadium, built in 2009, across the street from the old one was built on public parkland, which mandated demolition of the old stadium to maintain the same amount of park space deemed by city law. I also pointed out that Paris once regarded the Eiffel Tower as outdated after the World's Fair in 1889, but it was later repurposed as a transmission tower and became an international symbol of the city. I reminded the committee that the Astrodome has been Houston's international symbol since construction actually began. So why hasn't the Astrodome been renovated yet? Well, it comes down to sustainability, primarily for the tenants of NRG Park, and that makes perfect sense. The Rodeo and the Houston Texans organizations have significant impact on our community and require long-term sustainability to continue thriving in the decades ahead. Any plan for the Astrodome must include public accessibility, revenue generation, and benefit all the stakeholders involved, including the tenants and the citizens of Harris County. To that end, the Astrodome Conservancy has been working diligently for several years to guide this process. The Conservancy has the potential to facilitate private-public partnerships and tax incentives for such a project. There's no denying the nostalgic essence of the Astrodome. It has served as Houston's living room for decades and was the center of Houston culture and civic life. Many grew up attending events there, witnessing athletes, entertainers, civic leaders, historical figures, and religious gatherings that profoundly impacted the lives of millions of Houstonians. I never expected that as I walked out of the Astrodome following that final Astros game on October 9, 1999, that we would still be discussing this 25 years later. As Houston has redeveloped and grown over the past 2.5 decades, we look forward towards a future where our city is on track to become the third largest in the country. We must not fall into complacency. We should keep thinking big and find ways to connect the logistical dots to innovate and lead into the future on many levels. We are a city that has accomplished the impossible before. Reviving the Astrodome is not impossible. It's woven into the fabric of our civic DNA, and we should be proud to have the opportunity to continue utilizing a facility that has given so much to this city. The River Oaks Theater just recently reopened after a period of uncertainty. Its redevelopment should inspire hope that Houston can maintain lasting icons for generations to enjoy, rather than simply becoming a story of what once was. The Astrodome remains structurally sound, and the Astrodome is Houston. I look forward to the day when we can all walk into our Astrodome, a building as we as taxpayers own, and show the world once again just how well we do things in Houston. From the times of Jesse H. Jones, Glenn McCarthy, R.E. Bob Smith, Roy Hoffines, and many others, Houston has always been about getting things done. So let's get this done here in Houston. For Houston City Beat, I'm Mike Acosta.